Welcome everyone to 52 Living Ideas. Tonight is the Dao De Jing. We'll be looking at verses 45, 46, and potentially 47 if we have enough time. As always, type exclamation point in the chat in order to read your favorite translation. And then we'll go over to Jason for his translations and we'll move on to takeaways. So go ahead, let's get started. Avanique, thank you for your courage.
Thank you. No problem. So mine is from God as Nature Sees God translation. So it's verse 45 or poem 45, and it says, "True perfection seems flawed, yet its usefulness is never exhausted. True fulfillment seems empty, yet its usefulness is infinite. True straightness seems crooked. Great skill appears easy. Great eloquence sounds awkward. Cold overcomes heat. Tranquility conquers agitation. Purity and stillness is the universal ideal." And that's it.
Thank you, Avanique. Madeline.
Great accomplishment seems imperfect, yet it does not outlive its usefulness. Great fullness seems empty, yet it cannot be exhausted. Great straightness seems twisted. Great intelligence seems stupid. Great eloquence seems awkward. Movement overcomes cold. Stillness overcomes heat. Stillness and tranquility set things in order in the universe. And that was the Jia Feng and Jane English translation.
Thank you, Madeline. Next up, we have Penny. You're on mute, Penny.
Sorry.
No problem.
The greatest accomplishments seem imperfect, yet their usefulness is not diminished. The greatest fullness seems empty, yet it will be inexhaustible. The greatest straightness seems crooked. The most valued skill seems like clumsiness. The greatest speech seems full of stammers. Movement overcomes the cold, and stillness overcomes the heat. That which is pure and still is the universal ideal. That's J.H. MacDonald.
Thank you, Penny. Next up, we have Dave, followed by David.
Great completion seems incomplete, yet its usefulness is never exhausted. Great fullness seems to be empty, yet its usefulness is never used up. Great straightness seems to be bent. Great skill seems to be clumsy. Great surplus seems to stammer. Activity overcomes cold. Tranquility overcomes heat. If you're quiet and tranquil, you can become the ruler of the world.
Thank you, Dave. Which version was that? Oh, you're on mute.
Yeah, my translation is Robert G. Hendricks.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yep.
David, you're up next.
Yeah, thanks very much, Joe. And maybe going out on a limb here, but I'm predicting a table from Jason. So
we're hoping for one.
Exactly. Somehow I'm seeing the outline of a table that's right on the horizon. So this is from Herman. The greatest who actually this is I must say this is sort of not a strange trend, but this translation doesn't seem as structured as what I would have expected or what the other ones are presenting. So it's a more free form translation. The greatest perfection seems inadequate, but it is unfailing in its usefulness. What is brimful seems empty, but it is inexhaustible in its usefulness. The completely straight seems crooked. The greatest skill seems awkward. The greatest eloquence seems like stammering. Activity overcomes cold, but stillness overcomes heat. Only by purity and stillness will the world be governed.
Sorry, I was on mute there. Thank you, David. For those of you that entered in late, you can type exclamation point in the chat to read your favorite version of verse 45. I think I'll go ahead and read the Ursula Le Guin translation, just since we usually do read that, and give everybody a chance to type exclamation point, anybody that may want to share their favorite version. Her title is Real Power. What's perfectly whole seems flawed, but you can use it forever. What's perfectly full seems empty, but you can't use it up. True straightness looks crooked. Great skill looks clumsy. Real eloquence seems to stammer. To be comfortable in the cold, keep moving. To be comfortable in the heat, hold still. To be comfortable in the world, stay calm and clear. I don't see any other exclamation points in the chat, so why don't we just, oh, you know what, here, let me make you, 1 second. Go ahead, Jason, whenever you're ready. I think you're on mute, Jason. Jason, you're on mute. Jason, you're on mute.
Okay.
There we go.
So
There we
it's
go.
okay. All right.
Yep, now we hear you.
All right. So if you look at this one, and the great thing is it all start with this word, and that means in Chinese means great, big, huge. That's a very simple word. Okay. So that means the big something will look like something opposite, right? I think from the translation you probably know. So in this case, right now I decide to make a table. So that means the great A will appear B, okay, and the A and the B usually is opposite, okay. And in this case, A is a noun, B is adjective, okay. So first, I will say great success, okay, and the opposite look like incomplete, and abundance will look like empty, and then straight, and it looks crooked, and the skillfulness will look awkward, and the sophism will look like reticent. Okay, so then the translation will look, and then we will do this way. Then the great success appear incomplete, but its functionality is flawless. The great abundance appears empty, but its functionality is inexhaustible. The great straightness appears crooked. The great skillfulness appears awkward. The great sophism appears reticent. Okay, here I put the green words because from among green, and we kind of a little bit have a different opinion, and Among think that's another suggestion is the great debate appears inarticulate. I still use sophism. The reason is I look at all these words: success, abundance, straightness, skillfulness, sophism. They all something like attribute. Okay, some feature, not action or a thing. Okay, so that's why I think they should fit better is put all as some attribute or properties, right? Like success, abundance, straightness, skillfulness, and the sophism. So that's the reason I put the sophism appears reticent. But if then I think up to you how you think about this. And then this stanza is a little bit strange. And I think most of the translation were like restlessness overcome cold and calm overcome heat. There's some text they kind of believe it's reverse because you should have the something action, right? So there's a two version show up, okay? But I think the one version I decide to take this version, which is serenity overcomes restlessness, okay? Coldness overcome heat, okay? Because the words, I think they got swapped, become like, if you follow a lot of translation, become serenity overcome heat and the coldness overcome restlessness. I think it's probably mismatched, but up to you. Different people have a different opinion. I think these two should match, right? Serenity and the restlessness should be opposite. So serenity can overcome restlessness. And then another thing, you talk about the temperature. So coldness overcomes heat. Okay, that's my belief, because after summer, weather get colder. So I think that's the reason. But the other way, it also makes sense. But you can make a choice. And the last sentence is simple. That's clearness and the serenity set the pillar of the country. And I see a lot of translation put as the clearness and the serenity is the universal idea. I think that makes a lot of sense, and I like this translation as a universal idea. But I've been confined with the word in Chinese called 天下正. 天下 means under the sky, and the 正 could be, I believe the 正 means something real, okay, like a pillar, okay, like some ruler. This kind of meaning, probably less idea. But if you translate as a universal idea, I will say the meaning is very close to what this sentence want to say. I just have to try very hard to make sure it match the word. So that's I'm going to do for, I will stop here now. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Jason. Aman, would you like to comment on anything?
Yeah, it's been a couple of weeks since we actually did 45. I had to kind of go back and look at my notes, and there was no real disagreement, I think, so much about sophism and reticence. Like I had said, I think they actually work. I was offering an alternative, because unless someone knows specifically, they may have to go looking up sophist, but I do think it works. I agree with Jason on this, that the word order doesn't make nearly as much sense when you look at serenity overcoming heat and coldness overcoming restless. It makes more sense to have this in serenity paired with restless, coldness paired with heat. One thing that I did mention in our discussion back and forth is the particular choice of words for coldness, which is han. And it's not a common choice for the term of cold. Lang is much more common. But there is something somatic about choosing that word, han, as opposed to sort of conditional. And that makes almost all of this embodied. If you really read through these different skills, these different attributes, they're all embodied things. You feel successful, you feel like you have abundance, you feel like you're standing up straight, or you feel like you're creating great skill, or you're doing something skillfully. And I think that there is something to this passage that is subtextual, that is that what is Da, great, is the embodied experience of things much more than the appearance or simple conditions of those things sort of objectively agreeing. A simpler way of saying it would be, you could be Scrooge McDuck in a mountain of gold, but if you don't feel like you have wealth, then all of that counts for naught. And I think that speaks to a lot of people's experience of abundance.
Wow, that was beautifully put. Beautifully put. That was absolutely wonderful. Madeline and folks, now we can go ahead and everybody type exclamation point in the chat in order to share your takeaways with this particular verse.
I am wondering about the word pillar, the pillar holding up the sky. And is that the same character that is used in the older Chinese mythology about the division of the world and the I forget what it was, maybe it was a turtle or something else, but anyway, these four
Pangu.
pillars holding up the sky.
Oh, I thought you were thinking of Pangu. That's one of the old creation myths.
Yeah, I probably am. I just can't remember exactly what it was, but it resulted in pillars holding up the sky.
Okay, let me answer this one. Let me show this. Okay, first about Pangu. I have some opinion also on this because I don't think Pangu is real mythology during that time. They probably generate much later time. So I will exclude the idea about the Pangu, this kind of thing, because Pangu has appeared much later, because I don't see any text during this time talking about Pangu. I believe that's generally much later, but unfortunately, most of the Westerners consider that one as Chinese mythology. So I think that's my personal understanding on this. So first, I will reject anything related to Pangu on this text. And second thing, that's I'm not very sure, but let me share my screen. I just type a little bit. Okay, when Madeline asks about this word, 正, okay, this one means straight. Okay, let's talk about this word just by itself. 正 means straight, could be the standard, could be whatever. But during the ancient time, could be similar to this word called 真. That means one kind of cooker, okay, the big wok, okay. And this one sometimes represent your sovereignty, okay. So because they will put a big, if you go to the museum, you'll see the big cooker, big wok, huge, okay. This one usually used for the ceremony and a lot of time used for the sovereignty. That's why I kind of think about like, you can be the ruler, you can be the pillar of the country, okay, for the entire world. So that's why I put this word on that. But that could be just my opinion because I try to match the word, and the real meaning could be the universal idea, or some translation called the ruler of the world. Okay, I think that's the meaning for this word. So yeah, that's I like to say. Thank you.
It's interesting that all these this poem that starts with things that are crooked and awkward and stammering and everything results in something that is upright and straight.
That is David. Very interesting. I'll come back to that actually in a minute.
Yeah, I don't know if you wanted to hear. I was just wanted to comment on that. This line that Jason thinks is, or is, thinks is reversed. I mean, this stillness and cold and heat, because I mean, at least the way that they seem to be presenting it in many of the translations is sort of in a very physical manner, that if you're cold, you shiver or something to get warm, and if you're hot, then you stop running around and you try to calm yourself in order to cool down. So I think that that's what the translators are reading into it, regardless of whether the Chinese is actually in that order. But that, I mean, it is logical in that way, that if you're cold, you move around to get warm, and if you're hot, then you try to just relax and to cool off. So saying it in that very physical sense, but again, that is may not be what the Chinese is, maybe oversimplistic, or that the translators are trying to sort of impose or tease out a just sort of trite tautology from the Chinese statements to make for them to make sense, or for
Thank you, David. Jason, you want to comment? Go right ahead.
Yeah, I just type the word here in the because a lot of things go opposite. Okay, so a lot of things go opposite. So that's the whole Dao De Jing or Taoism teaching. Always talk about like very straight will become crooked, very hot become cold, very high become low, very something extreme something become the other way. That's so-called, that's a very common Chinese saying called, I type in the word, the so-called 物极必反. Okay, so the translation should be when things reach an extreme, they can only go move to the opposite direction, right? Just like climbing the mountain to the highest point, then you will start to drop. Okay. So I think that's the whole concept running through the entire, not only this chapter, entire text. So you will see a lot of great extreme something, they will go to the opposite direction. So the teaching here in general is ask you don't go to the full, like I think in the chapter 8 are talking about when you put the water in the bowl, if you make it full, then the next thing will happen is spill. So if you don't want spill, make it like 80, 70, or Lao Tzu didn't say 80%, but my suggestion is 80%. Okay, so I think that's the idea running through all the text. So that's what I'd like to say. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Aman, and then Kevin.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to jump the line there in front of you, Kevin. I did want to say, I think Jason's right on this. And what I believe it was David was saying about this being sort of ad hoc meaning added after the fact to a common mistransposing of characters may in fact be the case. There is some logic to this idea of coldness overcoming heat or stillness overcoming restlessness, in that it keeps to the theme that's throughout the Dao De Jing of no yang, but stick to yin. Real power comes from the more yin quality. Cold is a more yin quality than heat. Stillness is a more yin quality than restlessness. And so it when I saw it that way, it made a great deal more sense. And I agree with him on this one.
Oh, thank you for that. Kevin.
Thank you, Joe. My little bit different understanding first for the word Zhen. It's Peter. It's a good metaphor, for basically we have the in Chinese tradition we have 天地人, sky. The middle is a person and the earth. Basically, the person is like the pillar of they describe people. Let's say a good leader or something. It's like pillar of the country or family, the man for the family. However, I understand this Zhen is like policy as a government. So this is the last sentence. Basically, is kind of conclusion. What it is saying is only be quiet, being quiet and do nothing. Like Wu Wei can rule the world.
Yeah.
This is then third point I would make. Most time like Jason said, it's 物极必反, very extreme. Be put on our side. For me, this how is inextricable. What's that mean? Let's see if great success, it's look like incomplete. It's complete. So it's we don't need, let's say, work, doing so hard to make perfect. Actually, when you do nothing, maybe you could be perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Would anybody else like to comment on verse 45? Aman, please.
Kevin's comments actually made me think of an inverse understanding of that great success looks incomplete. I was thinking of the Grand Canal, which is probably the greatest infrastructure project in Chinese history, building this huge waterway from connecting the north and the south. And the incompleteness is that that canal needs to be dredged regularly, constantly. You're constantly removing the silt out of it. You're constantly making sure that it still operates. And so even once it was quote unquote completed, it's never really complete. The Golden Gate Bridge is painted from one side, starting at one side, working its way across to the other, and then you start all over again, so that these grand projects, these grand things will have an incompleteness to them that is a feature of their actual completed state. That's just what came to mind when Kevin was talking.
Thank you for that. Jason, would you like to?
Yeah, thank you, Kevin, for the Zheng. I think that's another way to think. I think that's a much more thing I need to think about. But I like to share the what this picture probably makes sense. That's the sky, Tian, that's the D, right? And the people, that's the three things important: the heaven, earth, and the people. And then they say 为天地正. That may probably means like this, or something like this, So the people and in the middle, something like this. So I think this picture probably represents something, graphically. And another thing I'd like to mention, and I forgot to talk about, is this word. Okay, I translate as skillfulness, and this one talk about the great skillfulness appears awkward. Okay, this word in Dao De Jing, this word is a little bit different. It's not used 技 or something as a regular skillfulness. It uses this word called 巧. Okay, this word is probably only Chinese, very Chinese word to represent the skill. A little bit not like a regular skill of making a tool or build a house, much more on the small skill. Okay, how to say that? A little bit negative, a little bit tactic, a little bit cunning. Okay, it's a little bit different than the regular one. I don't want to confuse too much, but I just want to mention this word is a little bit different than the regular words talking about skillfulness. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Great comments. Laura.
When I read it, I sort of had the feeling it's like one of these things that just telling you don't go to the extremes, because when it is absolutely freezing cold, you don't feel it anymore. I mean, the feeling's gone, it actually burns you. it goes to the opposite extreme of being cold. And when I looked at them, I just felt that in each case it was saying, don't go to the ends, because when you do, you lose all sense of what it is. Stay away from the extremes, because you're taking it too far. You're going beyond the limit of what this is as an entity. You're taking it beyond its molecules or whatever it is made up. And that's the feeling I got. It's something with a warning. And that's how I interpret it.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Laura. Carlos.
Oh, thank you. Okay, thanks for this is my first time in the meeting. Thank you for letting me join.
Welcome.
So yeah, I hear what Peter said and the other people said. Oh, Laura said the same thing. I think it's the word great. It's that extra 20% we don't need add into the equation. It's the adjective. When you take anything to the extreme, always seems a little absurd. And and the other end of the spectrum is don't need to look down on anything, because sometimes the very minute things can actually be the very solution, defeat something that seems so wonderfully great. So anyways, I just resonate the same thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Carlos, for your comment there. One of the things that I want to return to is essentially Amon's initial comments. If folks feel free to type exclamation point in the chat if you wish to make a comment on verse 45. But he talked about the idea of the embodied experience, that this, in the analogy I thought was actually excellent, where he said you could be like Scrooge McDuck swimming in gold and you still don't feel complete. And I thought about that. What is it actually that creates that feeling per se? And many times I actually felt, and maybe I'd like your opinion, Amon, that it's mostly value judgments. And again, this is this idea that we think our desires, these things that are going to fulfill us, actually end up not fulfilling us. And it's essentially we're making value judgments on all these different, what's straight, what's crooked, instead of letting it just be what it is. And I always look at this through a certain, I try to look at it even through a Stoic lens, so that we something that we've covered here. And even though I know that these are differences, where the Stoicism is more about understanding the order of nature, whereas the Tao is more understanding the natural order. But there's a certain acceptance as to what is. And again, if you're this embodied experience and this feeling that you're actually making these value judgments, that there's something missing. And that's essentially what I thought was actually kind of interesting when I was listening to your comments, that I thought about initially, Amon. But I don't know if you have any comments on that. But if not, go right ahead, please.
I do think there is a overriding theme within the Dao De Jing of, I guess you could call it managing expectations. I would almost say it more reorienting expectations. Right. Not thinking of things in terms of calamity or windfall, because I think Carlos said it really well. You see something great and you're witnessing it at the precipice of toppling. You overlook the small and it can be the most significant point. The sort of Stoic overlap within Taoism had me thinking of one of the Zhuangzi tales, which I won't get every detail right, but the nuts and bolts were friend goes to visit a friend who's sick and he's bent over and he's like, wow, look how amazing this is. I'm doubled over. If I was not before and now then I was, and now I'm like this, how am I going to change next? I mean, my arm could turn into a crossbow and then I'm going to go and shoot a pheasant. My buttocks could turn into wagon wheels and then I'll hitch my feet will turn into horses. It's this fanciful idea of embracing change, embracing the unpredictable, the uncertain, with sort of a child's whimsy at whatever is, even though supposedly this is a person in great pain. In some ways, that mirrors Stoicism, but Stoicism really has this sort of resign acceptance, whereas this is not about resign acceptance. It's about returning to that childlike wonder at the way things change in the world around you. And I do think that there is an element of that baked into this passage that is probably where some of the later texts, like the Zhuangzi, got those ideas from.
Interesting. Thank you for those comments. Excellent comments. And thank you for that clarification. Evanique.
Yeah. So what I was thinking of when everybody was commenting is, first of all, I had this question, like, what is completeness? Like, what does that really mean? Can something ever truly be complete? But then I was thinking, when people were talking, I think it was like, don't force it. Like, don't force perfection. Don't force, what you want. Like, sometimes we tend to force things to happen, and it's not meant to happen in that natural way. It's not meant to flow that way. And when Aman was talking, I was thinking, like, being present and in the moment and not trying to fix anything, not trying to perfect anything, not trying to correct the flaw that we see, because the flaw may be what makes it perfect. It seems flawed, but when you try to correct the flaw is where the imperfection will truly come in, because maybe it is meant to be there. So those are the thoughts I had.
Thank you, Evanique. Yeah, I mean, actually, I thought of a concept called wabi-sabi, which actually appreciates, the imperfections of things. So are there any more comments about verse 45? Okay, we got two. So
Okay.
Jason and Kevin, or
Yeah,
okay?
just quick. I like what you talk about the wabi-sabi. Okay.
Yeah.
The Japanese aesthetic, I think that's very interesting. And actually, the Japanese really got this idea from the Taoism, So.
Oh, that I wasn't familiar with. So I always thought it was a Japanese concept. So
yeah, because they also get it from the Taoism, especially Neo Taoism.
Okay.
They get it from there. Yeah.
Kevin.
Yes, actually, a little bit to prove what I mean is Zheng, that it's in the old days, the cord. I seen that link. Hopefully you can see that picture in the middle. They say the Zheng Da Guangming. The first word is Zheng. In the modern days, from left to right. Old days not that way, from right to left. So the first is Zheng. That means the gun. And then the right side have Su Jing, the Jing, which means use come, and I guess from Jason's use was he used the serenity. Yeah, that's
Serenity.
Yeah, serenity. That's mean that in the court judge. This when you let's say judge something for in the court. Judge and plaintiff all need to come down. Let's see for what's the correct. It's not from let's see. It's like that's why code and hard. They code you come down, then you figure out what's going on. So by the way, for that, let's see. If we learn OODA loop, you think about from OODA loop. If you see the perfect, is anything proved? Maybe next cycle you need to prove too. Environment change, condition change, context change. So it's always have, if you add time and space, things maybe change. Thank you.
That's an interesting perspective, that the orientation has to change, and yes, you have to flow like water. And actually, that's an important concept within the OODA loop itself. Madeline, somebody who really knows the OODA loop.
I wouldn't say I really know it, but I do really love it.
Okay.
It is that what Kevin just said, it's very similar to what Aman said about the constantly dredging the Grand Canal or repainting the Golden Gate Bridge. The acceptance of the necessity of the cycle of repetition, except that in Uda, the purpose usually goes beyond maintenance. It's more towards towards building or action in some way.
Yeah, that is one big distinction. It is actually not only about action, but it's about independent action on top of that. That's a really important distinction to make when you're talking about that, making that comparison. Great comments, everyone. Would anybody else like to comment at this moment in time? If not, we actually may have a chance to get to 47. With that, we'll move on to 46. Folks, go ahead and type exclamation point in the chat to read the version that spoke to you most. And Katie, welcome.
Thank you. I'm reading from the Stephen Mitchell version.
It's great.
When a country is in harmony with the Tao, the factories make trucks and tractors. When a country goes counter to the Tao, warheads are stockpiled outside the cities. There's no greater illusion than fear, no greater wrong than preparing to defend yourself, no greater misfortune than having an enemy. Whoever can see through all fear will always be safe.
Thank you. I don't see any more exclamation point. Oh, Laura, I was gonna say, if I don't get any more, then I think Shrikant may fire me. So so Laura, then David, followed by Evanique and Madeline. Go ahead. You have to unmute, Laura.
Difficulty with my computer today to get this. It wants me to upgrade something and I don't want to do it. Anyway, so it's 46, right? The 46th version. Okay, because I have Dyer, which we usually throw in the mix, and I feel like I'm shaking my head. His is, when the world has the way, running horses are retired to the fields. When the world lacks the way, war horses are bred in the countryside. There is no greater loss than losing the Tao, no greater curse than covetousness, no greater tragedy than discontentment. The worst of faults is wanting more always. Contentment is alone is enough. Indeed, the bliss of eternity can be found in your contentment. So a little bit different than the usual. I think this poem is unsettling.
Joe, you're on mute.
Well, that's I guess you didn't hear me say thank you or announce the order, so I appreciate that. So I have David, Brian, Evanique, then Madeline.
Thanks, Joe.
I thought Evanique was first for some reason, but I was wrong. Okay, go ahead. Sorry about that.
Yeah, I'm going to be very interested to see what the actual Chinese characters mean. Comparing some of these translations that I'm seeing in otherwise. So again, this Herald rule, I think this is, I'm guessing this is probably pretty literal. So we'll see. When the Tao is reigning on the earth, race horses are harnessed to dung carts. When the Tao is not reigning on the earth, war horses are bred even in the fields outside the city walls. There is no greater fault than yielding to uncurbed desire. There is no greater unhappiness than discontent with what one has. No greater calamity than greed and craving. For the content that comes from bringing content is an enduring content. It comes from being content, maybe.
Thank you. So next up we have Penny, actually, and then Evanique.
Okay, this is from Ron Hogan. When the world is right with Tao, Lao Tzu said, horses haul fertilizer to the fields. When the world loses touch with Tao, horses are trained for cavalry. Nothing is more insidious than possession. Nothing is more dangerous than desire. Nothing is more disastrous than greed. If you know when enough is enough, you will always have enough.
Thank you, Penny. Excellent. And then, so next I have up is Evanique.
So mine is from the God as Nature Sees God, a Christian reading. When the world keeps to the Tao, strong horses are best used to manufacture manure. When the world forgets the Tao, war horses are bred outside the city. There is no greater curse than discontent. Nothing breeds trouble, sorry, it just went off, like greed. Only one who is content with what is enough will be content always.
Thank you, Evanique. So next up I have Madeline.
Okay, this is the Jiafu Feng in Jane English. When the Tao is present in the universe, the horses haul manure. When the Tao is absent from the universe, war horses are bred outside the city. There is no greater sin than desire, no greater curse than discontent, no greater misfortune than wanting something for oneself. Therefore, he who knows that enough is enough will always have enough.
Thank you, Madeline. Next I have Margaretha.
Yeah.
Always look forward to your sharing.
Yeah, I will read in Bahasa. I think the meaning's very similar with everyone else. Kala dunia damai, orang tak membutuhkan tentara berkuda, bahkan lebih membutuhkan kotoran kuda untuk memupuk sawah. Kala dunia dalam perang, senjata dan kuda perang disiapkan di perbatasan kota. Bencana terbesar adalah sifat tidak puas. Bahaya terburuk adalah sifat keserakahan. Maka orang yang luhur budinya mengenal arti kata cukup. Inilah yang dikatakan cukup dalam arti kekal. Cukup is enough. Thanks.
Oh, thank you, Margaretha. So next I have up is Brian.
Okay, this is from DC Lau. When the way prevails in the empire, fleet-footed horses are relegated to ploughing the fields. When the way does not prevail in the empire, war horses breed on the border. There is no crime greater than having too many desires. There is no disaster greater than not being content. There is no misfortune greater than being covetous. Hence, in being content, one will always have enough.
Thank you for sharing, Brian. Jyoti, feel free if you want to go ahead and read the same one, Madeline. Sometimes we read the same version twice. If not, we can go to L. Go ahead, L.
Okay. This is a translation by John H. MacDonald, and it is, when the world follows the Tao, horses run free to fertilize the fields. When the world does not follow the Tao, war horses are bred outside the cities. There is no greater transgression than condoning people's selfish desires, no greater disaster than being discontent, and no greater retribution than for greed. Whoever knows contentment will be at peace forever.
Thank you, Al. So So Jason, would you go ahead and like to share your version?
Okay. I think this this chapter, the message is pretty simple. I think everybody get it, like be content. Okay, so the translation I'm doing here, okay, I will show. I try to do a little bit extra work on this one. So the first two stanzas is easy, right? When the world was governed with Dao, the fast horses were walking in the soil. That means we use the valuable horse to walk in the field. Right? And when the world was governed without Dao, the war horse were born on the battlefield, or you say breed on the battlefield. That means we use the horse, okay, in the battlefield. That's a good description. And then the next will be, I think it's David talk about curious to see how does the Chinese look like. Okay, so this one you see they use this word 足 4 times. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 times. Okay, 足 means food, but here means sufficient or enough, satisfied. Okay, so 知足 means content. Okay, you know content, so you use 知足 2 times. You see 知足. Okay, means content. Okay, and 不 means no, not content. So I just try to make sure the word, just like I like to do, is I like to make sure the word is kind of one-to-one match, so you will feel the same feeling as you are reading Chinese. That's what I try to do. So this one will be no calamities is greater than not recognizing sufficiency. No mistake is greater than desiring too much. So basically talk about same message. Therefore, the sufficiency of recognizing sufficiency is the unchanging sufficiency, because they have used 3 this word sufficient. So that means the sufficiency of recognizing sufficiency is the always unchanging sufficiency. So that's kind of that's the Chinese word reading, like say 知足知足常足. Okay, so that means they use the sufficient 3 times in this word. That's I try to achieve here. I hope it makes sense. Here is the one challenge. I have no answer, and I hope when you read it, anybody can give me your thought. That'd be great. Because there's 2 stanzas talking about the horse in the time with Dao and the time without Dao. And the later on the 3 sentences talk about the sufficiency or be content. That's the message. How does these 2 related? So I don't see the logical related, and I don't want too far away from the text, but it's very, I just don't feel they are connected. Okay, so if anybody have a different thought, and I'd like to hear your thought. Yeah, thank you.
Well, Madeline has her hand up, but Aman, would you mind if Aman goes first, Madeline?
I'd be delighted if Aman went first.
Okay.
Thank you, Madeline. I don't have the answer. I can say that the idea of horses were of preeminent importance in ancient China. That a horse was something that preoccupied the mind of many a person, because you had one, you were, you know, I don't want to say wealthy or affluent, but you were so much better off. It's hard to truly appreciate how difficult the Chinese landscape was to traverse without a horse. And even with a horse, it was a challenge. So it became sort of an emblematic symbol of having enough, having a means to be able to till your fields or cart your wares to town to be able to sell. And I think there's the notion of a fast horse implying a healthier breed. When the world was governed with Dao, then fast horses were plentiful. When the world was governed without Dao, war horses were bred on the battlefield. All these horses, then, all these signs of abundance, you can almost think of it in the modern terms of white picket fence, 2.5 children, and 2 cars in the garage. And then having to turn. Actually, it's a good analogy. Think about World War II taking the industrial structure and mobilizing it towards warfare. So suddenly there's rationing, there isn't abundance. People cannot get new tires for their cars because the rubber's being shipped off. In the same way, when the order of good governance is lost, you get chaos, you have wars on your frontier, and all of those horses now must be repurposed for the purpose of battle. And the idea that they would be born on the battlefield is even more, I don't want to say it, more anathema, because then they've obviously been out there long enough to breed and to germinate new foals and have a whole new breed of horse being born out where they're not serving the people who could use them in a very real way in day-to-day life. I think that and this idea of sufficiency are linked implicitly in that way. But again, not unanswered, just a way to read it and have it make some sense.
Very good insight. As always. Madeline, would you like to make a comment, please?
Yes, thanks, Aman. You put it much more eloquently than I would have. I was thinking of it connected in the same way. And I was sort of appalled to see Jason's translation of horses being bred on the battlefield, because it does connote a war that goes on for a long time. And in this one, it seems as if the example comes first, and then there's the commentary on the example, the enlargement upon it. And the example, I think that sorry, I'm having trouble putting it into words. Often war arises because one group of people feel that they don't have enough, that these other people have what we want, or that what we deserve, or that, by some ancient right we should have had. And so it can arise from a feeling of insufficiency. You're stealing our religious site that we used to have, or you are using fields that my great-great-great-great-grandparents had, or our people are superior in some way and therefore we need your minerals, whatever it is. And so out of all those feelings of insufficiency come the situation where the ordinary tools and ways of peace, the horses, become subverted into war, into the big war machine that Aman talked about. The example he used was the mobilization during the Second World War.
Yeah, it's a very interesting theme, how the scarcity mindset creates this warlike mentality. I'll go to Kevin next, but there's a lot to comment on this particular verse.
My turn?
Yes, go right ahead.
Thank you, John. The two paragraph sentence compare how to use horse. Horse can be used work on a farmer, or can be used for war. Worst case, even why here have you guys question about why the horse born in the battlefield? That's sad. If you think about those normally war is a man job or male horse they work on. They see here, they see used up. This not enough. So this horse should be work on the farmer and the have a baby on the farmer side. No, not in, they need to go to the battlefield. That's sad. So that's why he is horse born in a battlefield. The third and fourth, they all talk about the same things: crime or disaster, all come from not knowing enough. They have a desire more and more. You never enough. It could be the source of our criminal resource. Thank you. Yeah, by the way, I'm going to share, let's see, if let's see, use a metaphor horse here, use the budget for, let's see, for our government. We do put a budget on the military, or let's see, serve for internally, get rid of poverty, or get a better environment. Maybe climate change, how to help that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. Joe just have something, and so I'm take over now. So, Evanik, please.
Yeah, when I looked at this one, I was thinking, like, oh, coming at war with yourself. And I was thinking of, when we want excess, like when we want more than what we need, but not like, for enjoyment. It's just for, just for the sake of saying that I have it. Then there's like kind of like a war in yourself, because you're desiring too much. And that becomes greed, right? And when you have greed and you have excess, you want to go to war within yourself, but you also go to war with other people when you think they have more than you, and you can't just accept what you have or be grateful for what you have. So that's what I thought of when I saw this and when people were talking. Like, I got the idea of, obviously, of people using horses and, using horses and preparing for war, but I always think of like corporate America, like, you're preparing for war. And, I worked in corporate America for so many years. It's like people, especially in the insurance industry, for some reason, they use war references a lot. And it's just to get more money. It's just to have more money than the next person. And they sacrifice so much. And is it worth it? Like, they sacrifice time with their families. They sacrifice time with their friends, but they're obsessed with this power, like getting power, getting more land. And it's the same thing with countries going to war. Like, a lot of times they're going to war because they want someone's land or they want someone's resources. And instead of, making a truce or, talking about it, they're like, no, I'm just going to take it because I want it. So that's what I thought about.
Thank you. I apologize for the interruption. Thank you, Jason, for covering. Katie.
So 2 points. I like that they're using horses for both examples, because it's kind of like you're diverting your resources from one use to another use, which I think is pretty accurate, even today. That where you spend your money one way, you can't spend it on something else. And my second, I love, that's one of my favorite passages or lines in the entire Dao De Jing, is therefore he who knows that enough is enough will always have enough. It's sort of like, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good, might be maybe the American a good equivalent.
Aman.
I wanted to say I was listening to this and I was sadly thinking of a discussion I listened to recently about the prospect of war, particularly in the context of a war between China and the United States over Taiwan, because there's issues going on there. Somebody said something very insightful in that discussion, which I found both terrifying and very true. They said war is actually very easy to prevent. You simply give one side everything they want.
Right.
Which brings up the notion of insufficiency and this idea of greed or avarice. that whole knowing when like Katie said, enough is enough. It seems to be the single missing component anytime two countries must go to war, because neither one is going to give the other everything they want in order to simply avoid war, because it may come at the cost of something very precious to one side or another. So not to be too maudlin about it, but that was kind of that enough is enough, I think, speaks volumes to any would-be leader of any organization, excuse me, let alone a fourth century prince in China. You need to know when enough is enough, so that you are not simply trying to take more than your fair share, and recognize that people can't live on insufficiency.
That was really, really powerful on a number of levels. In the sense that I think that this is really a critical point, is that enough is not only something that is good for you, but it's also good for everyone else. And it kind of prevents this conflict from even occurring. So I think that was really well said, because whenever your desires are no longer satisfied, this lack of contentment, that it ultimately turns violent in a way, when you can't be satisfied enough, and you can't stop. And this, you can see this not only with resources, but also with power. And you've kind of lost the way of the Tao at that point. So I think I have, who's next? Laura. That was a great point, Aman. Oh, you're muted, Laura.
Thought what Amon said was right on target, except for that.
Oh, we're getting ahead.
No, wait. I was living in two worlds, sorry. Shut up. Come on, shut off. Why doesn't it want to shut off? It always wants to shut off.
Well, we
All
can
right, go.
there.
Okay, it's off.
Okay.
Okay, so yeah, it's really, point on, but that would require a whole different mentality, right? Because if you're just going to do that, what does power mean in that sense? I mean, it's not, power changes different. If you're just gonna, okay, I'll give you everything you want. That's sort of like kidnapper makes, has somebody, makes it, okay, give me $100,000 and I'll give you this person back. If it was so easy to get that, person and get money, it wouldn't have to go through all of that if you can just give people to give it up. But on that hand, so I think power changes, and I think anytime you go with that model, there's no issue. War is about power. It's about obtaining territory. It's about obtaining, all the power that goes with it. So if we give up on all those parts of war that, we fought for, that's all about what we're about in terms of our power strength, then it's all gone. And there's nothing, how do you gain more territory? How do you gain more land? How do you gain more, wealth? How do you do anything if you, don't have that sort of, I'll fight for it and I'll win it kind of mentality that,
Right.
So I don't know. I would love to see, it's like, oh, you want more? Here,
Well,
take it. I'll be happy to give it to you. We're just not gonna, I don't know how we'll ever get there.
Thank you, Laura. So we'll go with Katie, then we'll go with Carlos after that.
Yeah, I was at a discussion last weekend on it was like a really interesting comment that someone made that violence or war is like a strategy for something else. It's not like the end in itself, just to have like violence. So it's like, what are they trying to achieve? through it. So I think that's also kind of relates to the second part of it too, is like enough is enough. If it's just to expand territory or something, then also being like satisfied with what you have. And because I feel like the Dao De Jing is more like a pacifist, like you can defend, you know, if someone's, you know, exhibiting violence towards you, but like kind of like wanting something of something else, like eyeing someone else's, like, wow, you've got some nice land over there, I'm just gonna roll my Humvee into your area and take it, you know.
Thank you, Katie. Carlos, followed by Madeline.
Oh, hi.
Hi.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for all the different perspectives. I just want to draw the attention to the last part. I think the second, can you still hear me okay there?
We can.
I think the second one, 46, the second translation is a little different than the first translation. So the first translation say, therefore he who knows that's enough is enough, will always have enough. Okay, so now, but the second one, it says, whoever can see through all fears will always be safe. Now, it's a shorter translation, but they don't necessarily, in my mind, mean the same thing. Okay, the second one, I think, draws our attention to perhaps like there's this simultaneous sort of awareness of two different dimensions. Like there's sort of at the human level, I mean, what is enough is enough it's a judgment, right? So I mean, it's like verse 40, it's like chapter 45. I mean, what is complete? Well, that's just someone's judgment. So at the human level, this sort of conflict is almost inevitable because what's enough for me may not be enough for somebody else, right? So there's no, but to understand this, I think the next verse, okay, somehow it kind of like transcends that. And it says, whoever can see through all fear will always be safe. So I think, you know, at another level, if we can back all the way out to see that, you know, there's this sense of unity of all things, and to see that perhaps this conflict is part of the necessity of this existence itself, at that kind of maybe a different scale, a different level, and I can see what they mean. It's and I think I was reading the Chinese text. I think probably the second translation would be maybe more true to it. I think maybe the writer was making reference to this sense of unity, which can paradoxically create peace. So which we can never sort of attain at the level of sort of judgments, at the level of thinking. So somehow that if we, I mean, I think they're referring to the sense of being present, you know, the sense of enlightenment, that somehow that we could, as a collective, we can see that, in fact, it is actually in letting go of our fear that we'll ever have peace. So I think it's at two levels. So maybe, anyways, I hope I try to make a point. Thank you very much for the chance. Okay.
No, it's an excellent point. So for those who may not know, I believe you're reading the Jia Fufang version and the Stephen Mitchell version, and you're comparing the last two lines of each of those, right? And those are distinctions between those two. The one, as you had mentioned, is mostly focused on fear and how this fear manifests itself. You know, you're having fear of not having enough, which actually causes you to react. And then you have the other one that said, therefore, he who knows that enough is enough will always have enough. Is that correct? That is one where someone is understanding they're not afraid, and they're actually their desires and gratitude. You know, they understand when to stop. So that is one, and they are very different in how they and how those two versions actually finish. And I noticed that when I read those two in particular, and in earlier translations. So Jason, do you want to comment?
Yeah, I'd like to know what's the other translation about the fear. What's
So
the last
that would be the Stephen Mitchell version, I believe, is the one. Whoever can see through all fear will always feel safe. So,
whoever can see through the fear will
yeah. So you feel safe. Like this idea, if you embrace fear, then you're going to react very differently. But if you see through the fear, then you realize you're going to be safe.
That's
so
the last sentence.
That's the last sentence.
Okay, I just have to say that, well, they probably imply the right thing or something, but I just have to say straight from the translation, I have no way to connect these two together with fear. Okay, only have the satisfied. Okay, but I just have to say wrong. Okay, that's incorrect because nothing with fear under that sentence. That's I have to say. Yeah, thank you.
Yes, it was unique of its kind, that's for sure. And actually, even my interpretation of it was actually a little bit off, because you see through the fear, you feel safe. That's so the idea that you're not afraid of having less. Aman. Then I'll come back. I'm sorry to you, Madeline. Forgive me.
I had to giggle when Jason said just wrong. I have to make a comment on the Stephen Mitchell Dao De Jing, which, for the record, is one of my favorites. I very much enjoy it. It was probably one of the first versions I ever read, and I do think it is a very accessible version for a lot of people. It is an interpretation. It is not a translation. Almost any scholar on the subject will, tear out their hair and deride it as just a false flag translation. He was interpreting passages from translated passages, and his inspiration for doing so was his history with Zen Buddhism, which colors some of his thinking a bit. Having said that it is not a faithful or fidelitous translation of the Dao De Jing, it is an interesting interpretation of the Dao De Jing. And I do think that there is something in how he chooses to take this notion of satisfaction, of sufficiency, of enough, and sort of 30,000 foot it with the idea that you don't feel that unless you clear yourself of the anxiety of needing more. And so it is an interesting interpretation. But yes, Jason, you are absolutely correct. As far as a translation goes, no, it's wrong.
Well, I'll tell you, I was using his version for the Bhagavad Gita as well. So I'm a little bit now, you have me a little bit nervous.
They're great interpretations. And again, I don't fault it. I think it is an excellent interpretation of the Dao De Jing and an excellent read. And it's faithful enough that it can whet the appetite to make somebody really get interested. But if you're looking for something that really understands the classical Chinese, he doesn't speak Chinese. He doesn't read Chinese. He's not going to give you a faithful translation of Chinese.
So next up, I have Madeline. And Katie, don't feel too badly. I know that you're a big fan of the Stephen Mitchell translation. So I'm in I feel your pain.
I am too. I just want that clear.
Okay.
Well, this is a very, very good group of people here. The translation, the poem is about sufficiency in the sense of satiety or satisfaction.
Mm-hmm.
And we've been discussing war in terms of wanting things. And I'm glad that Laura brought up power, because there are other reasons that people want things and go to war. For example, so now I'm looking at sort of a secondary level, not basic things like we want your farmland, or, you have our religious shrine. Another reason to go to war is that the anticipation of conquest. And so once you've conquered some place, it's not the conquest itself, it's the anticipation of conquest that can become addictive. It's the knowledge that you can ramp up and grab more territory. The territory that you've then grabbed, that feeling isn't satisfying. You want the feeling of being able to get more. And so it's kind of a, I guess I would just call it sort of a secondary feeling. It's a sense of, like what Aman said about, well, if you just give the other side everything they want, but what if what they want isn't what you have? What if what they want is more? So no matter what you give them, they will want more.
I think, can I say something? I think Madeline's, hit it right. I mean, if you think about how the Romans
Think
went
of somebody
all that
like,
territory.
I think of somebody like General Patton. That he was essentially somebody that often people who had analyzed him said he needed the war as much as the war needed him. And that there is also something that is very interesting when it comes to, there's a saying that war is too important to leave to the generals. And the reason why is because that's what they're built to do. That's what they seek to do. So that's something that is really, it's a very powerful point, because the idea of, you have to look at what is absent in those individuals, more or less something that their absence of, they're never content. They are always looking at something that they don't have. And it's like this insatiable appetite. And it's kind of the opposite of gratitude, where you're just, gratitude is like you're imagining what it would be like for the things that you have that to be gone, and you have this certain appreciation for them. And it's really truly the absence of that I see. You see an absence of gratitude. It's just this constant need for more, and it's something that is ingrained in people. Madeline, do you want to make a quick comment? Then we can go to Laura and Carlos. Sorry for talking so much.
Yeah, no. I would just like to add the drive for violence, that there are people, as we see in the news with increasing frequency, it seems, who, for them, kind of the whole point of whatever their struggle is, seems to be that they get to engage in violence.
Right.
And so for those people too, any type of sufficiency is never going to be enough, because what they want is the violence.
Thank you. Laura, Carlos, then Margarita.
Okay, well, comments on the last couple things. Madeline, you're absolutely right. I mean, look at even gangs. I mean, there's that issue of, they want the violence, they like that, they're geared up, but they also want the territory that they take, because that gives them more people to have fight for them. They have more control over, and so forth. And for the Aman, it was also right on target. I do, however, think that, and I probably lost that thought a while ago now, that it is, oh gosh, you ought to let people with dementia go first. I think there should be a rule that anytime our hands go up, you have to take us immediately because we're going to forget what we had to say.
Well, we could institute an age role, but you'd have to put it in the corner of your box. I'm just joking. I'm joking. Totally
Yeah,
joking.
I think it's a
about that.
really good idea, and I'm going to request it because I don't think we get enough, support in this world. So I'm going to really become an advocate for everything senior. But yeah, no, it's just that war. I don't know what, we've seen it happen before our eyes. We saw what happened with war and what Vietnam was about. And it wasn't war, and it was terrible. And whatever we did there was awful. And we didn't do anything. We walked in, we made a mess, and we left. And lots of people died. We saw what happened in Iraq, and we saw what happened in
Right. I want to.
Afghanistan. Those weren't wars even. I mean, those were just bullshit. Things where we went.
I want to keep it. I want to keep it on the Dao De Jing, though. I want to make sure we get.
All right. Well, they all should have studied the Dao De Jing before they went ahead with this stuff. That's what I'm going to say. Because I don't know what to say about all that violence because I don't even know what it was.
Okay. Well, we'll if it comes back to you, feel free to raise your hand. Carlos, followed by Margarita.
I just want to acknowledge the last. First of all, I want to acknowledge the last speaker's comment about dementia. I've learned that.
I do want to keep it on topic to the Dao. I'm sorry. So.
Okay. All right. Fine. Back to the Dao. So I think if I was to read the Dao, I read the Chinese version. All right. I'm back. Sorry, the last sentence. It's Zizu means to know, right? To know enough. So first of all, I think enough contentment is the same as the lack of fear from, let's say, insufficiency, right?
Right.
So to me, I think that is it. I think that's an adequate translation in my mind when I read that Chinese term, right? Zizu, right? So to know Zizu, to know that I have enough, okay, yields. Or in other words, to know no fear, or to actually get past my fear, will allow me to see this as we have fear that is endure. We have contentment that's lasting. Okay, that's enduring. So that's basically what I read through the translation of the Chinese piece. Now, so I think it maybe at the collective level, if you look at the country, if you look at geopolitics and so on, it doesn't make any sense. But maybe at the individual level, let's say, if the battle is within myself, right? As an individual level, then, this is, if I read it like that, and I can see, this is actually very meaningful. And I think, I just want to leave a quote is to say, if I want to change the world, I have to be the change, right? So this is Gandhi, right? So I think the message is from maybe from the author that I take away is that let's start with myself. Okay, that's where it starts. And the world is going to go to hell in the meantime. But my job is right here with myself. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for those comments, Carlos. And just for the record, as Aman had stated, the Stephen Mitchell translation is, one of his favorites. And it's not to say the point that he was making, whoever can see through all the fear will always be safe. That's a really good point. It's valid. It just wasn't part of the translation. That's all. So that was the only point, the distinction. But good points. Thank you, Margarita. And forgive me, Aman, if I respect the words in your mouth.
I'm just thinking about this chapter. What is sufficient? What is enough? Because when you do something that you like, just like Katie said, it's rewarding. So you want to keep doing it. Even certain needs, for example, like power, sex, biological needs, when it starts flame up, you can't stop it. It just needs to be fulfilled. There is no satisfaction without fulfilling it. So what is enough? If we cut ourselves into doing something that we're destined to because it is our biological need, it seems like impossible. But I realized there are also, other than reward-seeking tendency in human, we also have our inhibitory tendency. We we have the ability to inhibit our previous response. And that requires some kind of skills. In fact, neuroscience says it's executive function skills. But again, it's not, I don't think this satisfaction or enough is a fixed state. It's something that should be flexible. You need to be aware. You kind of need to keep updating yourself whether you're having enough or this is already beyond. Or so this ability of knowing enough is between knowing that you're fulfilling your needs, but also you know that you have enough. So that kind of need recheck, updating yourself. Yeah, for me, that's also needed, not just limiting yourself into doing things because you just see that is too much or that is beyond enough. Yeah, that's my, I don't know whether that's my question or my reflection.
I'm going to let Aman go next.
No, do let Jeff go first, please.
Oh, okay. So I'll come back to you, Margarita, I promise. Jeff.
Hey, Joe. Hey, everyone.
Hey, how you doing?
So I think that the subject of war is a sadly it's a fascinating yet terrible subject, and so I'm curious as to because I'm not a student, I'm not enough of a student of the Tao to know the answer to this question. But does the Tao offer a pretty clear opinion regarding first aggression war? I'm not talking about defense once a tribe or group or country is attacked. I'm talking about what goes into if you will, the culture, the identity, the fears, maybe the desires, maybe the entitlement that provokes and supports aggressive actions of war. And I'm just curious as to what the Tao offers with regard to why war happens.
I have some thoughts, but I will leave it obviously to Jason and Aman for that. Aman, go ahead.
Thank you. That actually gives me something much better to jump off of than where I was going before, which I'll get back to. I think it's chapter 31 that actually says to something to the effect of weapons of war are to be despised. All good men regard them as an evil. I may be misquoting which chapter it's from, but essentially,
no, you got it right.
The idea is that you should attend. I think there's something in there of attend military processions like you are attending a funeral. It is considered the gravest and most unsavory of actions that a person could take, especially if it is an opt-in. It would be antithetical to the Dao De Jing to opt into that kind of war, or antithetical to Taoist precepts. It doesn't mean that it can't happen. There was a very interesting story I read a while back, excuse me, of a Taoist who was up in a mountain shrine at the start of World War II, when the Japanese began invading. And they had been invading China for about 3 years when he finally went to his master and said, I have to go and defend my homeland. And that was an opt-in. He could have stayed safe in his shrine, but opted to go onto the battlefield and was committed in battles for years before returning to the temple and finding out somewhat surreptitiously that his master had been doing the same thing on the sly for years preceding him. They had both been opting into this war that was happening down in the world around them. It was against the precepts of Taoism, but it was too important for their sense of national identity and for national security. So it's not as though it's an unforgivable sin, that sort of Judeo-Christian notion of having done something that tarnishes your soul wasn't necessarily there. It's an undesirable thing to do, but that doesn't mean that it is unthinkable or never acceptable. There can be circumstances where that is what is called for. At least that was sort of the takeaway from this. In the same vein, and on this notion that Margarita was talking about, it knowing biologically when enough is enough, I'm going to be somewhat revealing briefly, not turning on my camera, but I was in the Southwest last week and got my chance to have Navajo tacos, which I never get when I'm up here in the Northwest. I ate one probably the size of my chest, and it was only 4 hours later before I was visiting it again, which was my body's very clear explanation that I had gone past the point of sufficiency or enough. Sometimes you don't know what is sufficient or enough until you miss the mark, and only then can you learn from your mistakes and recalibrate. And I think that answers kind of both your questions.
It's an excellent answer and a fantastic example and a lesson for us all.
And if I never see another jalapeno again, it'll be too soon.
Jason, and then Kevin. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd kind of like answer Jeff's question on the aggression war. I would read all the, there's a different school of philosophy during this time. I mean, about warring state, or that's about 2,500 years ago in China. They all answer a common question, right? How do I, read politically, since Jeff is concerned about aggression war, let's assume that's all political philosophy. Okay, so they try to answer the question, how do I unite the world? How do I conquer the world? Or how do I be the sovereignty of this world? They all try to answer this question. And the Taoism, especially this book's answer, basics will be, even they will agree, do something, or do something called wu wei or something, will help you control the world, govern the world, be the model of the whatever you want to do. But I don't see any sense in any trace of in Taoism is supporting the war. Okay, even they in some chapter, Lao Tzu may say, do this, you can control the world, govern the world, but going to the war is not, at least is not directly option for Lao Tzu. If you are looking for something to support the war, then you go to the legalism, right? They talk about how to build your system, make your country strong, then you can win, right? But still not directly support the war. If you, I just 2 weeks ago, I do another meetup, okay? We are talking about the Sun Tzu, okay? That's totally directly go to the war, okay? Aggression war, Okay, so during the meetup, they have a different question, just opposite than Jeff's question. Okay, some people start to ask, how come Chinese never think about win-win situation? How come Chinese are so aggressive at going to the war? Yes, because you go to Sun Tzu, which we talk about the art of war, which is already decide you want to go to the war. So you ask the advice from Sun Tzu, so you go to the war. So really the situation depends on if you assume you are the prince or the feudal law, you have ambitions to control or govern this world. Then depend on who you ask, right? If you ask Lao Tzu, Lao Tzu will tell you do wu wei or do nothing, okay, be content. That's the way to do. If you ask Confucius scholar like Mencius, they will say, oh, how about be moral? Okay, respect your parents, okay, keep the social order, right? If you ask about the Moism, they have a different answer. They say, how about universal love? Okay, love your neighbor like your parents, okay, then everything will be peace. If you ask Sun Tzu, okay, they will say, okay, think about how much resources you have, okay, be ready, okay, if you, for your defense, if you have to go to wars, blah, blah, blah. So depending on who you ask, you got different answers. And right now we read Lao Tzu, we are asking a person who is Taoism. So his answer could be more quietism and passive way to do it. So that's the big picture when we read Lao Tzu, we should have in our mind. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Jason. So I have Kevin and Madeline, but Aman, are you wishing to respond really quick?
Oh no, I think my hand was just still up from before.
Okay.
Sure. I absolutely agree with what Jason was saying, and yeah, the Sun Tzu is actually very grave about taking war seriously and the cost of war seriously, and that's why so much emphasis is put on spying and being informed to minimize the cost in blood and treasure to whoever is going to commit to such a very, very serious act.
Interesting. So then I have Kevin followed by Madeline.
Yeah, I got so many common and first about, let's see, we learn all the loop from military, right? But we practice for the different ways, and, you know, like loop. The same thing from Sun Tzu, the war of art of war, right? The English translation. The same thing. Like if, but don't blame me. If she can share one story practical way, it's a work. Basically, you know, I don't want to share her story, but you know, it's sometimes it's like we got a knife. How do you use it? You won't cut for food, for feeding yourself. You want to kill somebody or hurt somebody. You got a horse, you can do a farmer, or you want to do a war field. You got a nuclear generator power, or you got a nuclear bomb. So it's what's the intent to do. That's for the Dao De Jing things I would say is just put a thing, let us think about it. It's always both yin and yang. It's not like what's the solution, this context. It's not simple like that, I would say. We lack thinking. We not like a solution. Everybody got own solution or by the way, that's I pause there for the chapter 44 and chapter 46. Currently we have, they share one. I shared if we use my 知足常乐, basically knowing enough is unchangeable happiness or contentment. It's the same thing. It's chapter 44, you review it. Knowing what satisfaction, you can avoid disgrace. Basically, I repeat Jason's translation. And the second is knowing what's the limits. You can avoid danger. What's limited? Enough. Enough is enough. Normally, we don't know enough. From personal, community, from country. Also, our culture, like I mean, the culture is global, not just each individual. It's globalization culture. We try productivity and profit. It's more make profit. I never say enough. Okay, I'm going to make a little bit profit, leave other profit for others. No, I want to winner take all. So what we are thinking, obviously need to think what our concept, what do we believe. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. A lot of points there, a lot of very interesting and poignant points. I'm going to go to Madeline next.
Yes, let's see. Well, I was several things. First, I was in that meetup group that Jason had. We discussed some of the 36 stratagems. And as I recall, for me, the most stunning takeaway point was that the 36th one, in order, it was actually the most important one, and that's why it was placed there. In Western civilization, we would have put it first. And that is the best thing to do is to not engage,
Right.
run away, don't get into the war. And so that's the most important one. I was thinking really, Margareta had mentioned biology. I think it was Margareta. And I was thinking about two things. One is sufficiency and the other is our primate heritage. So sufficiency, with our nervous systems, we tend to think of them as facing outwards and sensing only the world, but they're actually sensing our internal bodies at the same time. So that's how we know that we're alive. We don't have that delusional syndrome where you think you're dead. We're constantly getting feedback, and part of that feedback is whether we're full and whether we've had enough. The other biological aspect is that we are primates. And we are descended from some common ancestor, none of which is not alive today, obviously. And so we come from a long history of activity and violence. When we look at our cousins, I'll call them that, the other great apes who are alive today, they're very active. They do get together in groups. And they murder, and they also have what on their scale is probably wars. And I think that what we have going for us, there's a terrific book by Spikins, Spikins, called How Compassion Made Us Human. And what we have going for us is that unlike the other great apes and other animals that demonstrate compassion, is that we have organized compassion. We create societal structures that are stable and ongoing. Whether it's an extended family unit or whether it's social institutions of different kinds. And so despite our very long-term propensities as a species for violence, which the ancient Chinese political philosophers were trying to address as well on the other side of the world thousands of years ago, we do have this big countervailing force going for us.
Thank you. Very well put. And actually, that would be an excellent note, I think, to close out on. Do Jason and Amon, would you actually like to add anything to this meetup,
I think Madeline said it very well. I think she touched on what is one of the most fundamental components that Taoism tries to teach, and I think the Dao De Jing is where a lot of it stems from, which is not just compassion or empathy, but sensitivity to our environment, to others around us, learning to be sensitive, learning to be in touch enough to gauge what is the quote unquote right response. It's a skill that's never perfected. It's just something you work at to get better at throughout a lifetime. And I think that's kind of the advice when it talks about the unchanging satisfaction, is that the unchanging satisfaction is not satisfaction you obtain, it's something you work towards.
Thank you. Jason, would you like to add anything?
No, I think you guys that great. Yeah, I
No,
also
yeah,
learned a lot.
it's hard to follow both Madeline and Aman. So I just want to say, thank you to everyone, especially Jason and Aman, for the efforts, that you continue to make as we work through the Dao De Jing. I also want to wish everyone a very happy Thanksgiving. And I can honestly say that I'm extremely grateful for this group in particular, the Dao De Jing group, that, as we go through this journey together, it really has been something that I think about and I read in the morning. And your comments, obviously, Jason and Aman leading the way, really do make a difference in my personal life. So it's something I'm going to be grateful for this weekend. It was just it's been wonderful, and it's been a privilege to be able to host. I am going to go ahead and announce some upcoming meetups. On Friday, November 26th, we have two meetups, the Making of Meaning, and that is the book Flow. That is, I believe, chapter 10 that they will be going through. And that'll be at 7 p.m. on Friday. Then we have a very special meetup. It's the Bhagavad Gita, and in one story. So the whole thing in one story. This is it should be very interesting. I don't know how Srikant's planning to pull that off. I think there's a link on the website to a 30-minute animated show that he says is very profound. So definitely check that out. And aside from that, there are always meetups. Just check the website. But again, I just want to say happy Thanksgiving. I don't think I'm going to see anyone before Thanksgiving. So, everybody stay safe. I'm extremely grateful for all of you. And to spend Tuesday evenings with you is something not only that I'm grateful for, it's a privilege. So, thank you, everyone.
Happy Thanksgiving, Joe.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
Happy Thanksgiving. Thank you for hosting, Joe.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Thanksgiving, everybody.
Wonderful being a part of
Happy
this.
Thanksgiving.
Thank you.
I'm with Jen.